Good afternoon, everybody. This is another episode of Pick and Pop with Peter Marzano, and I have my reaction to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, a game that was really riveting. It was a classic old-fashioned basketball game, 87 to 79, the final score, and exactly the kind of atmosphere that you expect and kind of want to have in a Game 7. And really the setting coming into it was quite incredible. I mean, you're looking at LeBron James and the Cavaliers and the Celtics both having this storyline to where if they go to the finals, it's incredible. It's unprecedented. It's something that nobody really could have seen coming. I mean, of course, there's people that will always go with LeBron James and give him the benefit of the doubt as far as getting his way through the Eastern Conference because he has proven that, and he proved it again last night with another sensational, incredible game. And I'll talk more about that later. But I mean, really, his greatness is truly incredible and is certainly a great storyline. But then on the other hand, you have the Celtics, who on the opening night had a lot of pundits on the air saying that the season was over due to Gordon Hayward's broken ankle. And it kind of felt that way. They start 0-2, and then all of a sudden they go on this 16-game winning streak in which they beat the Golden State Warriors. They beat some other of the better playing teams in the NBA during that time and establish themselves as one of the best teams in the NBA going forward. And then they lose Kyrie Irving for the rest of the season. And then still, oh yeah, they're going into the playoffs, but they're a very weak 2 seed. They're a team that can get knocked out in the first round. They almost did, beating the Bucks in 7. And then it was playing the Philadelphia 76ers, a narrative of a young team who had been nearly unbeatable for a couple of months going into that series against the Boston Celtics, a team that was just as inexperienced, if not more inexperienced, than the Philadelphia 76ers, and certainly less talented. And I think that the 76ers ultimately were still the better team in that series. But I think at the same time, the Boston Celtics were so well coached, had everything in a rhythm during that 5-game series, and were able to make their way to the conference finals in more dominant fashion. Despite the fact that a lot of the games were close, they were dominant in the fourth quarter when it counted in that series, and that was certainly the difference. And then they going against the Cleveland Cavaliers to where they were, going up 2 games to nothing, a situation that the franchise had never lost a game in before, or a series in before, I should say. And then finally losing a series, and then getting the status of being the favorite in the series at that point, being up 2-0, being up 3-2. These are situations that have typically been favorable for the Celtics. But I think at the end of the day, this was something that, we didn't see and did see coming. I did say that the Celtics, I thought the Celtics would win the game, but Charles Barkley said that he didn't think they would. So I think that's ultimately why the Celtics lost. And as a fan, I'm certainly still getting over it. It's kind of tough. I love the NBA so much. It's been a big part of what I've spent my time doing in the past year or so, in the past 2 years for sure, but in specifically the context of this season, and especially to see the Celtics, my team, really go against the narrative that was, in against them in the media. And I think that was certainly something that was a driving force, a motivation for this team. Hearing that their season was over from prominent people in sports media. And of course, you have 5 minutes into your season and you lose an all-star, somebody you just signed a 4-year, $127 million contract to, your second contract in 2 years, to an all-star of that caliber, shelling out that kind of money. Of course, they gave nearly that same deal to Al Horford as well. And it's certainly worth it. But, now we have a very interesting situation for the Celtics going into next year. I'll probably talk about that sometime, but I do want to talk about, obviously, the game and my reaction to it. And I think really the turning point in the game was when the Celtics had a 12-point lead in the second quarter. I'm sorry about my hair. Just got home from work. It's very hot out as well, and it's distracting me. I apologize. But I think the turning point in the game was certainly in the second quarter. You have the Celtics with 35-23 lead. They were clearly had all the momentum in the game, were certainly in a good position to take the lead. And there were about, I think, 2 or 3 possessions. I can't exactly remember how many, but I think 2 or 3 possessions to where both teams didn't score. Celtics got some timely stops, but so did the Cavs. And I think at that point, when the Celtics weren't able to extend that lead, there was a missed three that would have pushed it to 18. And there's a huge difference, or not 18, would have pushed it to 15. And there's a huge difference between 12 points and 15 points. And if you're down 15 points halfway through the second quarter, that's another possession that you have to create with 6 minutes left in the frame. So the Celtics really should have been up by more at the half, and they weren't able to pull away at that point in the game. And then they let the lead squander to greatness. And at that point, I think it was just a matter of the Boston Celtics being in a situation where their youth was finally exposed. It was finally something that was prevalent. And I think the moment got the best of essentially everybody young on the Celtics besides Jason Tatum. And I think for Celtics fans, that's something that's incredibly encouraging. Looking at Jason Tatum coming into a game like this against the guy who has made it to the NBA Finals 7 straight times, and you're trying to stop that. And at 20 years old, somebody that's significantly younger than I am even, comes out and just absolutely balls, gets 24 points, as a ferocious dunk over the best player in the world, arguably the best player of all time. And you would think that that would start to change the momentum for the Celtics. They did have some moments in the second half where it looked like things would start to go their way. There were some turnovers. There were some really big effort plays made by the Boston Celtics that looked like they would change the course of the game. But unfortunately for them, it never happened. And I think a big part of that is, unfortunately, the play of Terry Rozier, who had an extremely disappointing game. And it wasn't just a game where you could look at the stat sheet and know that, obviously, shooting 2 of 14 from the field and 0 for 10 from three-point range. But it wasn't just his horrible shooting last night that really put the Celtics at a disadvantage. On top of that, there were several critical moments in this game where Terry Rozier made poor decisions. And I think in reference to those 10 three-pointers, several of them were early in the possession, off the dribble, shots that really don't have any chance at getting an offensive rebound, just really poor decisions. And then an even more critical moment in the game, choosing to shoot a three-pointer down 4 when he hadn't hit a shot all night, when he certainly could have created a pass. So factoring in all of that, it was certainly a disappointing game for the young Boston point guard, who is ultimately their backup. And I think that makes it interesting that at the end of the day, the difference between the Celtics not going to the finals and going to the finals was indeed Kyrie Irving. Despite looking so great without him, despite developing another system without him, something that Brad Stevens has done so many times already in his tenure with the Celtics, being able to get so many different point guards to work so well with Al Horford alone. I mean, look at getting Marcus Smart, getting Isaiah Thomas, getting Kyrie Irving, getting Terry Rozier, all to be very successful in a system with Al Horford, which is certainly remarkable speaks to the credit of Brad Stevens. And I think that certainly is what facilitated Terry Rozier having such a great postseason for the most part. But I think it was a situation of the moment getting the best of him, which I didn't really see happening because of how well he played in Game 6. Shot 6 of 10 from 3, was extremely confident. And I really don't think that he wasn't confident in this game. He was trying to make all the big plays, but his decision-making was just not in the right mind of trying to give the Celtics the best chance to get back into the game. And I think specifically in the fourth quarter, when you're trailing 74-70, you should create a better shot. Excuse me. You should certainly try and create a better shot with some time left on the shot clock as well. So I certainly think that that was a huge factor in this game, despite the fact that LeBron James certainly proved why he is the best player in the world and arguably the greatest player of all time, playing all 48 minutes, which is just looking at that alone, that is so incredibly impressive. In his 15th season at 33 years old, somebody that has not suffered a major injury up to this point, And I certainly think that that is a big part of what contributes to not only his greatness, but in general, the players that are listed above among the best players of all time have really been fortunate with never having a major injury. I mean, Kobe Bryant was near the end of his career. Michael Jordan, outside of the retirement, obviously didn't have a major injury in his career. And LeBron James, incredibly, who is one of the best conditioned athletes in the world, has not ever had that happen to him. And he had an incredible game last night, 35 points, 15 rebounds, 9 assists in 2 blocks, and he got the help that he needed. Jeff Green, who stepped into the starting lineup in place of Kevin Love, had 19 points, 8 rebounds, and assists and a block. The former Celtic, who is at times the best player on their team, had a huge game for the Cleveland Cavaliers and really facilitated them making their way to the NBA Finals for the 4th straight year, and for LeBron James, the 8th straight year. The Boston Celtics only played 7 players last night. Jason Tatum, the most impressive, 24 points, 7 rebounds, and assists and a steal. Al Horford had 17 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. Jaylen Brown, 5 of 18 shooting, 3 for 12 from 3. He certainly did not have a good game, but apologize. Allergies are really bothering me up here right now. But yeah, obviously Jaylen Brown did not have a very good game. I don't think it was quite as bad as Rozier. Simply, I mean, obviously he scored more points, but I think Jaylen Brown was just visibly kind of rocked by the atmosphere of this Game 7, especially the pressure of being 10-0 at home in the playoffs coming into the game. And I certainly think that it was something that affected some of these young players. Marcus Smart certainly on that list as well. He made some great plays in some huge effort plays that don't show up on the stat sheet. He had 4 points, 4 rebounds. He did have some great passes, ended up with 7 assists, and also had a steal. But was 1 of 10 from the field and 0 for 4 from 3. And when you have somebody taking 10 shots, that's something that you really want more of. So you look at the battle of the backcourts, George Hill and J.R. Smith. J.R. Smith had 12, George Hill with 6. They combined for 18, which certainly isn't great. But Jaylen Brown and Terry Rozier combined for 17. 13 for Brown and 4 for Rozier. And then when you add the 4 points from Marcus Smart on 1 of 10 shooting, that is a combined 8 of, let me do some quick math here, 32. Yeah, 8 of 42 shooting of the 3 members of the Boston backcourt in last night's game. And that's just something that is not going to win you any games. And credit to the Cavaliers defense. LeBron James at several moments set the tone for them defensively, and that's something that he has to do. He has a great way of knowing how to rest himself while on the floor. So, he's not always going to give that 100% defensive effort early on in close games or in games that he knows are still within reach. Timely plays, along with getting his teammates really good looks, and that's more than the ones that they made. Kyle Korver was 1 for 6 from 3, and the 3 that he hit was probably the hardest contest he had on him the entire night. So, LeBron was creating incredible looks for his teammates who really weren't able to knock many of them down, but enough of them down in addition to his 35 points to get them the win. I think it's incredibly impressive for the Cleveland Cavaliers. At several points this season, the amount of internal discord on that team, the amount of things that seem to be going wrong. Obviously, the roster overhaul at the trade deadline, where you only have 5 remaining players from last year's team, but they were able to make it happen. And I certainly think it is about time to give Tyronn Lue the credit he deserves in bringing this team through the postseason. They faced elimination in the first round, trailed in that series twice, got blown out in Game 6, and found a way to make it happen in a Game 7. Were able to cruise their way through a Toronto Raptors team that they just mentally have an edge on. And in this series, just incredible. I mean, with how great Brad Stevens is of a coach, and I certainly think that he drew up some brilliant plays tonight, but when your team shoots 7 for 39 from 3, 29 for 85 from the field total, that's just going to be a big problem. And it's very uncharacteristic, even of this team that isn't exactly offensively dynamic, to score just 79 points. And it certainly had that old school vibe. There were a lot of, the tension was very high with scoring at a premium for both teams. And I think it was a well-coached game on both sides. But I certainly think that Tyronn Lue deserves a ton of credit for bringing his team back from a couple of deficits in this series, winning a Game 7 in a very hostile environment. As much as LeBron James deserves all the praise in the world for his performance, you got to give his coach some credit here. He's really found a way to make it work, not just with LeBron James, but with getting guys like Larry Nance, Kyle Korver, George Hill, and obviously Jeff Green last night, and even getting J.R. Smith into a bit of a rhythm, getting those guys into the rotation and confident to play. And that's certainly something that was a matter of miscommunication earlier on in the season. It was really looked at as the fact that this team was a collection of individuals and not a team. That was something that was frequently said about them in the media, but I really think that at critical moments in the postseason, they have looked like a team. And I think especially with the absence of Kevin Love being able to rise to the occasion for several of these players, especially Jeff Green, and Tristan Thompson had a big game as well, 10 points, 9 rebounds, had some huge rebounds. I think they all deserve a good amount of credit. So certainly a very impressive win for the Cleveland Cavaliers, but certainly also a very impressive season for the Boston Celtics, and something that I do think that, I give them a ton of credit for. I did not foresee them at all making it to this point. I had them beating the Bucks in 7. I had them losing to Philadelphia in 6. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, after getting so close to the finals and being a game away twice, greatness takes over. And I don't think that there's ever a strategy to combat LeBron James. But I do think that if Kyrie Irving was on the floor instead of Terry Rozier, that would certainly make a difference. It'll be really exciting to watch tonight's Game 7. I think Golden State's definitely going to win. I know Andre Iguodala was ruled out. I'm assuming that Chris Paul is also out for tonight, but I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not expecting him to play. With that being said, I certainly think the Golden State's going to win tonight, and we will have a 4th straight Cavs-Warriors finals, one that Golden State will be heavily favored in. But that's kind of all I have for you today. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll be back tomorrow with my reaction from tonight's Game 7.